Hello children, in this video I'll be dealing with chapter 3 plant kingdom, and we know plant kingdom comprises 5 divisions: algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms. Now I'll be dealing with the first 3 divisions, which comes under cryptogams, that is non-seed bearing plants or plants whose reproductive organs are hidden. So let's start. So before starting off with each division, we have to learn what is this concept, alternation of generation. In plants, there are 2 phases, the diploid sporophytic phase and the haploid gametophytic phase. Remember, diploid is shown with this form, in this abbreviated form, 2N, and haploid N. Remember, the sporophytic phase is diploid and the gametophytic phase is haploid. They alternate one another. That is, the sporophyte, as the name suggests, it produces spores. And these spores, when it falls on the substratum, germinates into the gametophyte. And the gametophyte, as the name suggests, produce 2 gametes, namely the male gamete and the female gamete. Female gamete is the egg and the male gamete is the sperm. In plants it is called the antherozoids. These fuse, the 2 gametes fuse, and we know it forms the zygote. So here it is N and here it is N, so what we get 2N, and this zygote develops into the sporophyte. So from this, let me elicit the difference between sporophyte and gametophyte. So sporophyte, gametophyte. The first difference is sporophyte is diploid, gametophyte is haploid. Second difference is from the very name. Sporophyte produces spores, gametophyte produces gametes. And lastly, the sporophyte gives rise to the gametophyte and the gametophyte gives rise to sporophyte. How? The sporophyte gives rise to the gametophyte with the help of spores, and gametophyte gives rise to the sporophyte with the help of fusion of gametes. So we get 3 differences between sporophytes and gametophytes. Once again, the first difference is with respect to the ploidy. Sporophyte is diploid, whereas gametophyte is haploid. Second difference is, what does a sporophyte produce or possess? Spores, whereas gametophyte produces the gametes. And the third is, the sporophyte gives rise to the gametophyte, and here it is gametophyte gives rise to the sporophyte. And remember how the sporophyte gives rise to the gametophyte? With the help of spores, and spores are N, haploid, and gametophyte gives rise to the gametes, which develops into the sporophyte. Now let's justify with the ploidy. Now you see, the ploidy of gametophyte is N. How did it become N? It is produced from spores, which are N, and the spores are produced from the sporophyte, which is 2N. So how did 2N become N? By which division? So recollect your divisions, meiosis and mitosis. So which division is applicable here? Where the chromosome number becomes half, it is meiosis. So remember, by which division? By meiosis, the sporophyte gives rise to the spores, and then the spores, definitely N becomes N, so it is by mitosis, gave rise to the gametophyte. Then the gametophyte produces the 2 male and female gametes, and look, gametophyte is N, and look at the gametes are N. So which is it? By mitosis. And then this N and N fuse to form 2N. So the zygote is 2N, which forms the sporophyte. So you can also incorporate the third point as a cell division point. That is, the sporophyte gives rise to the gametophyte by spores, which are produced by meiosis, whereas the gametophyte gives rise to the sporophyte by the fusion of gametes. And how are the gametes produced? Gametes are produced by mitosis. So that cell division can be incorporated as your third point. So once again, only analyzing the third point. Third point indicates that sporophyte gives rise to the gametophyte. How? Through spores. And how is the spores formed? By meiosis. Now, again, the third point for gametophyte, the gametophyte gives rise to the sporophyte. How? By the fusion of the gametes. And these gametes were formed by which division? By the cell division mitosis. So, in all we have three differences between sporophyte and gametophyte. And these two phases, they alternate one another. And the duration of each phase, the gametophyte or sporophyte, the duration, then whether they are dependent or independent. Here dependent means they depend for nutrition. That means they are non-photosynthetic. When they are dependent means it's non-photosynthetic, or independent means they are photosynthetic. Whether they are unicellular or multicellular varies from division to division. We are going to analyze the different division, algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes in this video. So we can see the duration of the phases, gametophyte or sporophyte, whether gametophyte is longer than sporophyte or the sporophyte has a longer duration than gametophyte. Then whether the gametophyte is photosynthetic and or the sporophyte is photosynthetic, whether the gametophyte or the sporophyte is unicellular or multicellular. So all these aspects will be dealt in the coming slides because they vary from division to division. Here I want to highlight one more point. Now only one phase of the two phases, only one phase will be dominant. I am giving with the mnemonic D stands for dominant, and that phase will be independent. And that very phase will be photosynthetic and multicellular. So I'll go ahead from slide to slide with this abbreviation. D stands for dominant, I stands for independent, P stands for photosynthetic, and M stands for multicellular. So one of the phase, it can be sporophyte or gametophyte. One of the phase will be DIPM, dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. So the other phase, if one phase is dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular, the other phase will be just the opposite. So let's analyze the opposite of each. Correct opposite of dominant is short-lived. So the meaning of dominant is with respect to the duration. They have a longer duration. And the term uses dominant. Dominant in the with respect to its span or length of duration. So the opposite will be short-lived. Then independent, we know, dependent. Photosynthetic, opposite, non-photosynthetic. Multicellular, unicellular. So we get the correct opposite of this. So once again I am giving the full form. Short-lived for S, dependent for D, non-photosynthetic, unicellular. So once again I am reiterating the fact that when we move from division to division, one of the phase, it can be sporophyte or gametophyte. Any one will be DIPM. So if suppose sporophyte is DIPM, dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular, definitely the gametophyte will be just the opposite. It will be short-lived, dependent on the sporophyte, non-photosynthetic and unicellular. So let's go from slide to slide, and it varies from division to division. It's not hard and fast rule, this is the format. Sporophyte is DIPM and so the gametophyte, it varies. And you can see even an intermediate condition also arises. So going into each slide, when I am taking each slide, I will be dealing with the habitat, then with the plant body. Now the plant body can either be a sporophyte or gametophyte. So the one which is having a dominant phase or the one which is DIPM is the real plant body. So I will be giving the structure with respect to DIPM, the phase which is possessing DIPM. So it can be a sporophyte or gametophyte. Then the third aspect will be, if I am describing first sporophyte, definitely the third point will be dealing with the gametophyte. Or if the second point is dealing with the gametophyte, the third point would be the sporophyte. Then the fourth point is a life cycle. What type of life cycle? If it's haplontic, diplontic or haplodiplontic. So here I will bring the three life cycles. The three life cycles are haplontic, diplontic, and the third category, which is an intermediate category, haplodiplontic. In haplontic, you can guess which is haploid, sporophyte or gametophyte. It's a gametophyte. The gametophyte is DIPM. Clear? In diplontic, so it's diploid. Which is diploid? The sporophyte. Here the sporophyte is DIPM, dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. But in haplodiplontic, it's an intermediate condition. It is found in the bryophytes and pteridophytes. I am bringing these two. It's an intermediate condition because in bryophytes and pteridophytes, one phase should be DIPM. In pteridophytes, it is the sporophyte that is DIPM. Whereas in bryophytes, it's the gametophytes that is DIPM. But why they are getting, if it is gametophyte, definitely it should be haplontic. If it's sporophyte, it should be diplontic. Then why it is getting the phase haplodiplontic? We can check when we deal with bryophytes and pteridophytes. So the three life cycles are, once again, the three life cycles are haplontic. Very clear. From the life cycle we can understand the gametophytic phase is dominant. That is, it is DIPM. Dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. In the second category, that's diplontic, we can guess is the diploid phase, that is a sporophyte, that is DIPM. And the third phase of special life cycle, which is haplodiplontic, it's an intermediate condition. It is possessed by bryophytes and pteridophytes. That is, in bryophyte it's a gametophyte that is DIPM, whereas in pteridophyte it's a sporophyte that is DIPM. So, if gametophyte is DIPM, it should be haplontic, and if sporophyte is DIPM, it should be diplontic. But it is not haplontic for bryophyte, neither diplontic for pteridophyte. Instead, it is haplodiplontic. When I deal with the slide on bryophytes and pteridophytes, we can analyze that. So, from this slide I am moving on to the next slide, which is exclusively going to deal with each division. So, I hope you have understood from this slide alternation of generation. There are two generations, sporophyte alternating with gametophyte. Remember the difference between the sporophyte and the gametophyte. The sporophyte is diploid, gametophyte is haploid. The sporophyte produces the spores, the gametophyte produces the gametes. The sporophyte produces the spores by meiosis, the gametophyte produces the gametes by mitosis. And also we have learned the three life cycles. There are three life cycles: haplontic, where we can guess it is a gametophyte, that's DIPM. So diplontic, where the sporophyte is DIPM, and we have an intermediate condition, haplodiplontic, where we can see that when we deal with bryophytes and pteridophytes. So the first slide is dealing with the first division, algae. You are very familiar with this. See, the picture that is depicted on the slide is a green color water. See, the water, especially in Kerala, our backwaters, temple ponds have this coloration of greens, different shades of greens. This is imparted due to the algae present. There are three classes of algae. The brown algae, which imparts brown color, it's present in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, etc. Then green algae, which is very prominent in the Kerala backwaters, the green algae. And we have the red algae, which is found in the Gulf countries and certain areas in Austria, in Europe, the Red Sea, etc. That is because of the red algae. So the color is imparted because of the algae present. It's not due to any pollution. So first of all, the habitat. Why I told you about this, you can correlate. Algae is present in the water, which imparts color to the water. and they are not visible to the naked eyes. So first is the habitat. Algae is present in water bodies, namely the freshwater bodies or the marine water bodies. Also they are found in association with fungus. We have learned the association of algae and fungus is called lichens, and there is a give and take policy in this. Also it is found in association with the fur of certain animals like the sloth bear. You can see the bear is furry, but here you can see in sloth bear it is covered with a lot of algae. So once again the habitat, it is fresh water, is found in fresh water or marine water, or in association with fungus, then it is called lichens, or in association with the fur of animals like the sloth bear. Now after habitat we are going to deal with the body. Now I told you which is the dominant phase here, it is a gametophyte. So when I describe the body structure, it is a gametophyte. So definitely you have to write DIPM. You get one feature from the abbreviation DIPM. So here in algae the dominant phase is the gametophyte. So the real plant body is the gametophyte, which is dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. And I am going to describe the body. The gametophyte is not differentiated into root, stem and leaves, but is in the form of a thallus. Thallus means a flat dorso-ventrally flattened structure, and this is microscopic also. And they may be unicellular or multicellular, they may be single or in a colony, and they can be filamentous. See, this is a unicellular algae, Chlamydomonas. Then Volvox, it is unicellular but exists in a colony. Then there is a filamentous algae, the Spirogyra. See, so these are different algae which are found in the water bodies, and they are almost all of them are microscopic. So what does this body represent? It is the gametophyte. So the real plant body is a gametophyte. Now the next is the sporophyte. The sporophyte, as I told you, it should be opposite to the gametophyte. Opposite of D is short-lived, dominant, short-lived. Independent opposite, they are dependent. Photosynthetic, non-photosynthetic. Multicellular, this becomes unicellular. So we have the sporophyte of algae, which is short-lived, dependent, non-photosynthetic and unicellular. Now classification. Algae are classified into Chlorophyceae, Phaeophyceae, Rhodophyceae. Now Chlorophyceae is called the green algae because of the predominant pigments chlorophyll A and B, which imparts green color. Then Phaeophyceae is called the brown algae because of the presence of this pigment fucosanthin along with chlorophyll A and C. So the brown color is due to the fucosanthin. Then Rhodophyceae is called the red algae. It is red in color because of the predominant pigment phycoerythrin along with chlorophyll A and D. So these are the different classes of algae: Chlorophyceae, green algae; Phaeophyceae, brown algae; and Rhodophyceae, red algae. And last, the life cycle. It is it's haplontic, justified by this. Why it is haplontic? Because the gametophyte is dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. This is the most simplest form which you can easily elicit the life cycle. It is not going to be complicated. Clear? I hope you have understood algae. Moving on to the next division, the bryophytes. Now bryophytes, you are very familiar with these bryophytes. They are the green carpets found on the walls, on the damp walls, especially during the rainy seasons. So the habitat. They are found in moist places like damp walls, rocks, trees, trunks and soil. Now here, the real plant body again here, like the algae, it is the gametophyte. So I am going to fill in our abbreviation DIPM. So here the real plant body is a gametophyte which is dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. So I am going to describe the gametophyte. So this is the two bryophytes that I have pulled out. Now this is also very familiar to you all. It is a bright green color you can see on the walls. This is a dark green color which you see on the wall. Okay, during certain season only you can see this projected structure, otherwise it's only up till here you see the grassy structure. Now here I am going to describe the structure. It is representing the gametophyte. This grassy structure is representing the gametophyte, and here this is representing the gametophyte. This wedge-shaped structure, V-shaped structure is representing the gametophyte, which is the real plant body. So here we can see it is not differentiated. A plant, what comes to your mind, it should be differentiated in root, stem and leaves. No, it lacks true root, stem and leaves. It is differentiated into leaf-like. It's not true leaf. Leaf-like, stem-like and root-like structures. So they lack root, stem, leaves. They possess root-like structure, leaf-like structure and stem-like structure. It's not the true root, leaves and stem. And they can either be like this, that is erect. So this is an example of erect type, or it can be prostrate, flattened, oppressed to the wall. Dorsoventrally flattened, prostrate structure attached to the wall or the substratum. It can either be like this or it can be erect. That's this. It can be prostrate. The meaning of prostrate, once again I am saying the meaning of prostrate is the one which is depicted here, the first one, and the example is Rhytia. See, Rhytia is also common on the walls. It is prostrate means it is flat, dorsoventrally flattened and oppressed to the walls, fixed to the walls, or it can be like this, as in Mercantia or Funaria. It is erect. So I hope you have understood the two types of body structures. It can either be prostrate, that, or erect, Mercantia. And these structures, how do they attach to the walls? They do not simply glue the walls. There are some rhizoids, root-like structures, which can be unicellular. In this case it is unicellular, whereas in this case it is multicellular. Attached to the substratum by unicellular or multicellular rhizoids. And being gametophytes, definitely what it should possess? It should possess the male sex organ and female sex organs. The male sex organ is called the antheridium and the female sex organ is called the archegonium. So once again I am going to describe the gametophyte, which is representing the real plant body. The gametophyte can be like this or like this. So what is this? Prostrate. What is the meaning of prostrate? Dorsoventrally thalloid-like, oppressed to the wall or rock or substratum, or it can be erect. Then it is, whether it is prostrate or erect, it should be attached to the substratum with the help of rhizoids. The rhizoids can be unicellular as in this case, or it can be multicellular as in this case. And what they possess is not true roots, leaves and stem, it is false. Root-like, leaf-like, stem-like structures. And being gametophyte, you must understand they produce gamete producing structures, that is the male and female sex organs, namely antheridium and archegonium. So that's all about the gametophyte, which is DIPM, dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. So now we are going to speak about the sporophyte, which should be just the opposite. We have learnt now. Short-lived, dependent, non-photosynthetic and unicellular. Short-lived, short-lived, dependent, non-photosynthetic and unicellular. Now here, short-lived is justified, correct. It is short-lived. It is dependent. Yes. It is non-photosynthetic, but it is not unicellular, it is multicellular. Now I will make you find out which is the sporophyte in this diagram. Taking this diagram, see, all of you focus this diagram, I am going to redraw over it. See the structure, I drew over it, that erect portion, and then I came down and then the leafy part. Now, the down leafy region depicts the gametophyte. this upper region. So the down which is in blue like a grass like structure depicts the gametophyte. This upper portion which is projecting up, see, one stalk like region and then a bulb like structure. This represents the sporophyte. And we have noticed the gametophyte are always on the walls. Sporophyte we notice only in the month of June, July, August. That is rainy season we see the sporophyte. Otherwise the sporophyte is not there. So from that itself it is justified that the gametophyte is the dominant phase. It is found throughout the year. It is independent. It is green in color. So it is independent. It prepares food by photosynthesis. Third point. And also it is multicellular. You can see it with your naked eyes. You are not using the microscope to see these grassy structures. But looking at the sporophyte, we know it is short-lived. We see it only in the month of the rainy seasons, that is June, July, August. Not only that, it is depending on the gametophyte. For what and all is depending on the gametophyte? It is depending on food on the gametophyte. It is deriving its nutrients from the gametophyte. One, it is depending on the gametophyte for anchorage. So it is again dependent. It is non-photosynthetic. Though it is green in color, only this upper part is green in color. The remaining part is the violet or reddish color. So it is non-photosynthetic. But you can see it with your naked eyes, it is multicellular. So I hope you have figured out the sporophyte and the gametophyte. So remember, for bryophyte, you just take this in mind. The base part, which is grassy structure, represents the gametophyte, which is found throughout the year on the walls. But in between only the gametophyte gives rise to these projected structures which represent the sporophyte. Now talking about the sporophyte, it has three parts. Talking from top, telling about the top part is the capsule which produces the spores. So this is the capsule, see, like a projected bulb. This is the capsule. Then the capsule leads to the setae, the stalk structure. Stalk-like structure, setae, which I am going to indicate in yellow, long stalk. And then it is anchored into the gametophyte with the help of a foot. I am giving violet color. So there are three parts. Once again reiterating the parts: capsule, setae and foot. So this is the sporophyte. I hope you have understood the sporophyte. It is found on the gametophyte. It is short-lived. You don't see it every time. It only during the rainy seasons you find it. Then it is dependent on the gametophyte for anchorage and food. It is non-photosynthetic. And lastly, it is multicellular. You can see it with your naked eyes. And as the name suggests, it is a sporophyte. So there is a cup-like structure capsule which contains the spores. And the spores will rupture and release and fall on the substratum, and when they fall on the substratum they give rise to the gametophyte. That is how it is alternating. Okay. So it is from the spores of the sporophyte that the gametophyte arises. Then the gametophyte is spreading over on the wall, and then again during June, July the gametophyte gives rise to sporophyte. The sporophyte grows, the capsule ruptures, releases the spores, and the spores fall on the substratum and give rise to gametophyte. So I hope you have understood the sporophyte. It is differentiated into foot, setae, capsule. This capsule comprises the spores, and this is attached to the gametophyte from which it derives its nutrients. Now coming to the classification of bryophytes. Classification of bryophytes is based on the criteria plant body structure. Now here we have the first class of bryophytes. This is indicating the liverworts. So the first picture is indicating the first class, the liverworts, and the second picture is indicating the second class, moss. So we have our two representatives. For liverworts, I have taken the picture of Ritzia, and for moss, I have taken the picture of Funaria. So, and the criteria for their classification is the body structure, and that was described in the beginning. So, describe the body structure of liverworts. Prostrate. I told you the meaning of prostrate, dorsal-ventrally flattened and oppressed to the substratum, and they are attached to the substratum by unicellular rhizoids. So, 2 points you get. They are prostrate, that is flat, thylakoid-like. And second point is they attach to the substratum by unicellular rhizoids. Now moths, they erect. This is moths. They erect, leafy, attached to the substratum by multicellular rhizoids. So you get two differences between liverworts and moths. So first is with respect to the body. Here it is prostrate. Here the body is erect. Here it is attached to the substratum with unicellular rhizoids. Here it is attached to the substratum by multicellular rhizoids. In both the cases, sporophytes are born, but sporophytes are born only during certain period of the year, and as I told you, only during the rainy season. So this is also having the sporophyte with the three parts: the foot, the setae, and the capsule. And the life cycle is haplodiplontic. Now can you say why we have to say it is haplodiplontic? As I told you, the two phases, the gametophyte is DIPM, the sporophyte is SDN. It should have been U, but instead of U it became M, just because it is multicellular like the gametophyte. The life cycle becomes haplodiplontic. So you understood why it has become haplodiplontic. It should have been haplontic. No, it should have been haplontic because it's the haplontic phase or the haploid phase or the gametophyte, that is DIPM. But we can see the sporophytic phase is opposite to D, opposite to I, opposite to P, but it is multicellular just like the gametophyte phase. That's why it is coming under the intermediate condition called haplodiplontic, just because both the sporophyte and the gametophyte are multicellular. Though the sporocyte is short-lived, though the sporophyte is non-photosynthetic, though the sporophyte is dependent on the gametophyte for anchorage and nutrition. I hope you have understood bryophytes. The third division coming under cryptogams, pteridophytes, they are called the vascular plants. They are found in cool, shady places. It's very common. You will have seen this. Now it's grown in pots. It has ornamental value now, and also for flower decoration, for making bouquets, we make use of these fronds called ferns. So where are they found? In cool, shady, moist places. And here the real plant body is the sporophyte. So all this while algae and bryophytes, the real plant body was a gametophyte. Now a switch over. It has become more advanced. The real plant body is a sporophyte. So the sporophyte is DIPM. I can blindly write DIPM, dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. Let's check the structure of the sporophyte. It is differentiated into true roots. The earlier we said false roots, root like, leaf like, stem like, but now it has become more advanced. It has true roots, true stem and true leaves. Now the name of these leaves, the leaves are not called leaves, they are called microphylls if they are very small, or if they are large they are called macrophylls. It does not mean both microphylls and macrophylls are found in the same plant. There are ferns or the pteridophytes which are having very minute leaves to plants that are having very large leaves. So the range is there. They may have microphylls or macrophylls. So micro or macrophylls are called the leaves. They possess well differentiated vascular tissue. So what does this mean? Algae and bryophytes did not have vascular tissue. They absorbed water directly with the help of rhizoids. Bryophytes, with the help of rhizoids, they drew the water. So they did not have vascular, they lack vascular tissue, very important. Bryophytes, though they are found on damp surface, they use water for fertilization. Water is obtained with the help of rhizoids, not with the help of vascular tissue. Its vascular tissue is appearing in pteridophytes. Therefore, pteridophytes are also known as vascular plants. So once again, the real plant body is a sporophyte, that is DIPM, dominant, independent, photosynthetic and multicellular, and you can see it's differentiated into true leaves, true stem and true roots. And the leaves are special, they are called microphylls if they are small or macrophylls if they are large in size. Now, as the name suggests, it's sporophyte. So what does it mean? Sporophyte means they produce spores. And if they produce spores, it should be formed in some spore bearing structures. These spore bearing structures are called sporangium, plural sporangia. And these sporangium are located on some leafy structures, and these leafy structures are called sporophylls. So, it is very easy. The sporophylls are leaf-like structures which bear sporangia, and the sporangia consists of spores. And the spores found in pteridophytes are usually homosporous, same type of spores. So, I am just redrawing on this. See, you can see this is a leaf, this is another leaf, and this is a leaf that is matured. How did I say? Why did I say it is a matured leaf? Because you can see this macrophyll. This is a macrophyll. It is having large leaves. So, all these are macrophylls, leaves, macrophylls. But you can see this macrophyll leaf has spore bearing structures. The spore bearing structures are called sporangia, and they are seen like pearl spots, exactly like pearl spots, off white in color. So, now what I have indicated is those spots which carry spores are called sporangia. Inside the sporangia, I am going to indicate in red, small red, are the spores. So, we have the sporangia which contains many spores. Okay. And where are these born? These are born on leaves. So, these leaves are called the sporophylls. So, you got the hierarchy. The sporophyll has the sporangia, and inside the sporangia there are the spores. Clear? I hope you have understood. Once again, get the hierarchy. The sporophylls are the leafy structures which contain sac-like structures which contain spores called the sporangia, and inside the sporangia there are a number of spores, and the spores are homosporous. I hope it is clear. Now, it need not be in the form of, the sporophylls can be in different forms. It can be in the form of leaves, as in this case. See, this is the case. In the form of leaves, or it can be in the form of cones. Cones at the tip. See, like cones. So, that is complete about sporophyte. Now, the other phase is the gametophyte. So, if this is DIPM, what should be the opposite? Short-lived, dependent, non-photosynthetic and unicellular. Now, let us analyze for pteridophytes. This is the picture of a gametophyte, of a pteridophyte. Look at this gametophyte. It is heart-shaped. It is a prothallus prostrate attached to the substratum, and the substratum is the floor of the forest, of floor of the area which is cool and shady and moist. You can see it is a very rare scene to see this, and it's always, you can recognize as a heart-shaped structure, and this is the exaggerated version of the gametophyte. See, it's heart-shaped. It is thalloid or prostrate or thallus, and you can see rhizoids, unicellular rhizoids for anchorage, and this indicates the male and female sex organs. Because it is a gametophyte, it should possess the male and female sex organs, that is the antheridium and archegonium. Now, from this structure, so much elaborate we have described. So, definitely, is it unicellular or multicellular? It is multicellular. Multicellular. Then, it is green in color. So, can we say that it is photosynthetic or non-photosynthetic? It is photosynthetic. It is not non-photosynthetic, it is photosynthetic. Then, it is not at all depending on the sporophyte. See, the sporophyte is here, gametophyte is at a far distance. It is not at all depending on the sporophyte for nutrients or for anchorage. It is growing independently. See, maybe this is the sporophyte of this gametophyte, but look at the gametophyte at a distance from this sporophyte. I purposely made it part of this. So, here you can see in the forest, if there is a sporophyte in the very close vicinity you can see the gametophyte, and nowhere there is any physical association of the gametophyte with the sporophyte. So again I am cutting off this. It is independent, but it is short lived. Only this is correct. So here you can see deviates from the normal what we said. Only the gametophyte is short lived. It is one reason for it to be short lived is that it is not covered with cuticle. When it is not covered with cuticle, definitely it is prone to drying and therefore dries very easily. So it is only found in those forests which are with a thick canopy of trees where it does not allow penetration of sunlight, and this foliage, green foliage or dry foliage. When you remove the foliage, you might see this oppressed or so stuck to the substratum, heart shaped structures. Then only you will identify, oh, this is a gametophyte of pteridophyte. So if you are going for an study tour or species collection, you will see gametophyte, or the botany students go to forest like Tattekadu to get the gametophyte specimens. It is not easily, you might be having a sporophyte in your pot, or maybe having a sporophyte near your well, or having a sporophyte in the drains or gutters, but a gametophyte is rare to find because it is restricted in distribution, because it is not having this cuticle covering which every plant has. So it is subjected to drying. Not only that, it requires a lot of water for fertilization. For the antherozoid to fuse with the egg, water is a medium, and if there is no water, it does not survive. That is the reason why the gametophyte is very rare to find. Only sporophytes are found everywhere, but gametophyte you can see in dense forests. I told you why dense. There is a canopy that shades the sunlight, there is a green foliage, a dry foliage that covers the floor of the forest, and therefore when you remove this you can see it's shady. You can see lots of these heart shaped structures, multicellular structures attached to the floor of the forest. It is not at all bryophyte, it is the gametophyte of pteridophyte, which is once again heart shaped. It is a prothallus, it is photosynthetic, it is not depending on the sporophyte, but it is short lived. Okay, so now it is deviating from the usual. It should be SDNU, but what is it? It is S only, short lived, but it is independent. It is in no way depending on the sporophyte for water or for nutrients or for photosynthesis. In no way it is depending, it is independent, which means it is photosynthetic. So green color, it is photosynthetic and it is multicellular. So in that context we can say the life cycle is haplodiplontic. It should have been diplontic. Why diplontic? Because the real plant body is a sporophyte, so it should be diplontic, but it is haplodiplontic because this is the reason. The gametophyte is, though it is short lived, it is independent, photosynthetic and multicellular. Because of that reason, it is having this type of life cycle which is described as haplodiplontic. So now going to the structure of gametophyte, I have explained with the help of the slide and extra information. Now I am going to read what is given on the slide. It is a free living, multicellular, prostrate, heart shaped, green thalloid with unicellular hairs for anchorage. It possesses the male sex organ called antheridium and the female sex organ called archegonium. It lacks cuticle and requires water for fertilization. Therefore, it is restricted in its distribution. It is not found everywhere. It is very restricted. These conditions should be favorable. It should be moist, it should be damp, it should be shady, it should be cold. Then only it will survive. The gametophyte. I am reiterating, we should not get misled or misunderstand this to be bryophyte. It looks like a bryophyte, but it is a gametophyte of the pteridophyte. Clear? And I justified why it is haplodiplontic. Now moving on to the classification. The classification is based on the plant body. It is divided into 4 classes: Coelopsida, Lycopsida, Spinopsida and Pteropsida. And this has lots of relevance to the Jurassic age. If you have seen the film Jurassic Park, you can see the plants or trees that were represented in the film was very scientific. They didn't fix any tree or plant that for picturizing. It was correctly they selected all the pteridophytes because the pteridophytes were very prominent during the Triassic and Jurassic period. They were the first to invade the land. They were the first land plants. The pteridophytes were the first land plants. So during those periods, it were the huge ferns, the huge pteridophytes that survived. So that has great relevance in evolution. And these are the plants in which the vascular tissues appears. So once again I wind up this video with pteridophytes, which are otherwise called vascular plants. The real plant body is a sporophyte, and we know it's in this plant only that there is a true stem, leaves and roots, and the leaves which bears sporangia, and the sporangia bears spores. Such leaves are called sporophylls. The leaves are called fronds, or in 1090 you have learnt it as fronds, but it is called actually, they are small leaves, they are called microphylls, they are large leaves, they are called macrophylls. So that's all about the sporophyte. They are spore bearing structures. They are DIPM, dominant, independent, photosynthetic, multicellular. So this is the sporophyte. Its gametophyte is found at a distance. No physical association with the gametophyte. It is found on the floor. It is heart shaped. Look very clearly, it's heart shaped. Thalloid or prothallus, flat, attached to the substratum by unicellular rhizoids, and as the name suggests, the gametophyte. So it produces the antheridium and archegodium, the male and female sex organs. And lastly, it is attached to the substratum with the help of rhizoids. And it's restricted in distribution, 2 reasons. One, it is not covered with cuticles, so subjected to drying, and secondly, it requires water. What anthrozoids require water for fertilization. So if it's lacking, it will not survive. Clear? And its life cycle is justified as haplodiplontic because both the sporophyte and gametophyte are multicellular. Also here in this context, I can say both are photosynthetic, both are independent. Only thing the difference is sporophyte is dominant and here the gametophyte is short-lived. I hope you have understood the 3 slides on the 3 division, algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, with respect to their habitat, with respect to their body, the 2 phases, that is the gametophyte or the sporophyte, the classification, and finally the life cycle. And life cycle, why it is so called haplodiplontic. It is justified from the 2nd phase. So with that I am winding the first part of plant kingdom, Cryptogams. Thank you.